everyone, welcome to the MAP District Reports tutorial. When the district created reports come out, they're going to discuss two different things, achievement and growth. When we look at MAP achievement, we're going to look at MAP by achievement level and MAP by a met, not met summary. The 5 different MAP achievement levels are Not Met 1, Not Met 2, Met 3, Exemplary 4, and Exemplary 5. Now there's a separate level assigned for each subject. These levels are based on student RIT scores, and each level is associated with the RIT score range, which varies for each subject and grade level. The achievement levels are decided this way this year. Right now, to fall into a Not Met 1 category, the student would fall into the 0 to 24th percentile. To fall into a Not Met 2 achievement level, the student would fall from the 25th to the 49th percentile, and so on as presented on the screen. Now, the 50th percentile is the baseline for Met 3 at this time. This is NWEA's best estimation as far as Common Core standards. Since the standards are changing again this year and we still don't know about state assessments for next year, right now, just to keep up consistency, we are sticking with the 50th percentile for that baseline of Met 3. So anything 50th percentile and greater is going to be considered met. The MAP achievement summary. Anything met will include the categories Met 3, Exemplary 4, or Exemplary 5. And our Not Met category will include all Not Met 1 and Not Met 2. This is what the MAP district summary by subject looks like, and this is page 1. At the top, you'll see the district. This includes all students from all grade levels and which of the 5 categories they fell into. And as you can see, for Not Met 1 we had 36.1%, for Not Met 2 we had 26.1%, and then represented in the below graph, Met and above, we had a total of 37.8% for math and 62.2% not met for math. To the right, you can see the similar representation for reading, with 31.9% at Not Met 1 and 24.5% with Not Met 2. In the below graph, this is represented by 43.6% met and above for reading and 56.4% not met for reading. This is an example of the MAP district summary by grade. And you will also receive this at each of your schools at the school level. Growth is the second section of MAP reporting, district created reports that we're going to look at. And it's important to remember that in order to have MAP growth, students must test in the fall and in the spring to be included in these growth reports. And again, these are district created reports. These are not created by NWEA. Each student is going to be measured by their growth value and by their RIT growth. So the first step when we're doing MAP growth values, we're going to assign achievement levels to fall RIT scores. We're going to do these based on the spring expectations, and we're going to identify students' beginning of the year achievement status based on the spring expectations. Now, it's important to remember that low achievement levels are common for fall since we are assigning levels based on spring expectations. So based on spring expectations, this is an example of 5K reading achievement level ranges. And we're going to look at a student's fall reading score, and let's say John Doe scored a 151 in the fall for reading. So he falls into the orange Not Met 2 range. So his achievement level is Not Met 2. Now step 2, we're going to assign achievement levels to spring RIT scores after spring testing. And these are also going to be based on the spring expectations. So these are the same expectations for 5K reading, but we're going to take John Doe's spring reading score and see what category he fell into. As you can see, he fell into the blue exemplary 4 category for spring. So for the third step, we're going to match the students' fall and spring results and determine the achievement level movement. So where did he start? And we're going to look at then where he finished and assign a value based on that movement. So John Doe, in the fall, he was in a not met 2 range, and in the spring he was in an E4 range. So his movement was from a not met 2 to an E4. Based on that movement, we're going to assign a growth value. Low growth values from 0 to 45, students will receive a 0 to 45 if they fall into a not met level from a met level, or if they stay in a not met level from fall to spring. If students receive a 50 growth value, it means in the fall they tested at met 3, and in the spring they tested in that same achievement level bracket at met 3. The reason they get a 50 and it's not any higher than that is because they had the potential to move into an exemplary 5 range, but they didn't. They stayed out of met 3. The reason it's not lower than 50 for this group of students is because they may not have risen to E5, but they also didn't fall into not met 1. And at the end of the year, they are still at a quote-unquote met level. So they have a 50 out of a scale of 100. Students who receive the highest growth values receive a 55 to 100. Those students either grew into a met level from fall to spring, or else they stay in a met or above level across fall to spring. So students testing at met in the fall and at E5 in the spring, they would be getting that higher range of growth values. So if John Doe tested at a not met 2 in the fall and at an E4 in the spring, he would be assigned a growth value of 75. And now we're going to use these growth values to evaluate the students as groups. You can use this as an individual evaluation method, but we're going to try to answer these questions with these values. Did the students start in a not met level and move into a met level? This would be obviously a good thing. Did the students start in a met level and move to an exemplary level? Or did the students start in a not met level and stay in a not met level? Now we're going to look at map growth for math. And we gave the goal, we had the goal be a 50 for this past year, because this is the first year we've tried this growth model. And we set a 50 because this would indicate a student either stayed in a met or above category from fall to spring, or they started in a not met achievement level and grew into a met category by spring. Our mean growth value for this past spring in 2015 was 41.4, which is obviously below the 50 goal. This is the distribution of how the students fell into each achievement level. The brightest red indicates students starting in a not met and staying in a not met. As it becomes gold, it indicates students started in met and either fell a little or grew a little. And as it gets brighter green, it indicates students started at a lower point and grew to a higher point. And this is a chart letting you know what the growth values were for each category of students. For example, students moving from not met 1 and staying at not met 1 from fall to spring would receive a growth value of 20. And students starting with a not met 2 and falling into a not met 1 would receive a 15. Now the reason students starting at a not met 1 and staying at a not met 1 receive a 20 is because they didn't have anywhere to fall, but they also didn't fall anywhere, and it's kind of hard to explain. In other words, a 20 is better than if a student had started at an E5 and fell into a not met 1. Those students, for instance, would receive a 0. So for students starting in a not met 1 and staying at not met 1, they receive a low value, but they do receive more points than students who begin exemplary and fall into a not met category. And then as it gets to be gold and green, a couple of examples of these categories are students who start not met 1 and move to met 3. They would receive a 60. And students starting in not met 2 moving to met 3 would receive a 55. Now the reason not met 1 to met 3 receive a 60 and not met 2 to met 3 receive a 55, well, because not met 1 to met 3, they jumped 2 levels as opposed to only 1. Not met 1 to E5 would receive a growth value of 100 because they start at the lowest point and end at the highest. Not met 2 to E5 is a 95. And that just kind of work. This lets you know the levels, the movement levels, and how many students fell into each category. The brightest red, the not met 1 or not met 2, and they moved to a not met 1, we had 2,214 of those. So 35%, or 2,223 of our math students are still performing in or dropping down into a not met 1 level after a year of classroom instruction. 25.5%, or 1,844 of our math students grew from a not met to met or exemplary, or grew from met to exemplary after a year of classroom instruction. For reading, we had a 42.9 mean growth value for spring 2015. Here's the same type of distribution. It doesn't vary that much from math, just a little bit, but kids generally fell into very similar categories. And it improves as you go around the circle. 58%, or 3,577 of our MAP reading students either perform in a lower level in the spring than they performed in the fall, or perform in a not met level in both fall and spring. 18.2% of our MAP reading students grow into or maintain an exemplary level from fall to spring. This is a summary of the growth values by grade. Again, 5K is represented by the 0, and then it ascends to 8th grade. The red is math, all of the mean growth values by grade level across the district. And the yellow line represents the goal of 50. And the blue bars represent the reading mean growth values at each grade level. MAP RIT growth is much simpler to explain than the growth value system. MAP RIT growth indicates the growth of RIT points from fall to spring for each individual student. So to find RIT growth, we simply take the spring RIT score of a student and subtract the fall RIT score of the student to find their RIT growth. So if we take the same fictional student we used before, John Doe in the spring for reading tested at 165 for his RIT score. In the fall, he had tested at 151. So 165 minus 151 would equal a RIT growth of a positive 14 points. Now, negatives do happen here for students who actually test at a lower RIT score in the spring than they did in the fall. For instance, if John Doe had tested at a 165 in the spring, but in the fall he tested at a 170, then the RIT growth would show a negative 5. This is a summary by grade level of the mean RIT growth for math. And these numbers right here represent, for first grade, they had a 13.1 mean RIT growth. And for 7th grade, they had a 2.4. Now, at first glance, that might indicate that 7th grade was performing a lot lower than 1st grade. So to provide some perspective on these numbers, we're also going to look at these yellow bars, which indicate the national RIT growth norm at each grade level. And as you can see, the norm does decrease at each grade level. So 7th graders aren't expected, as far as the national norm, to gain as many RIT points as they are at 1st grade. Now, we still are not meeting the national RIT growth norm, but the gap is a lot smaller than if we were holding 7th grade to the same standard as 1st grade for a year's worth of RIT growth. And that just shows the descending trend across the grade levels. And this is for reading. And then the yellow represents the national RIT growth norm for reading at each grade level. In grade 8 was the only grade that actually matched the national norm, with the 0.8 for district-wide 8th grade compared to the 0.7 national norm. Here we have an overview of district-created map reports. To the left, you'll see the report type. In the middle is a brief description of the report, and to the right is the expected availability date. Now, these dates refer to the number of days after the spring map window closes. These are the expected days after the window closes that you'll be able to retrieve these reports. For all of the following sample reports, all school and teacher names have been blacked out for confidentiality purposes. This is an example of the first page of a school achievement summary report. At the top, you'll see performance by achievement level, and then you'll see performance by met, not met summary, and at the bottom are the tables with the exact numbers. And this report does include all students in all grade levels for each school. This is page 2 of the school achievement summary, and you'll see this is by teacher, a met, not met summary, and the exact numbers at the bottom. And this is page 3 of the school achievement summary. It's percent met, not met by grade level, with the exact numbers in the tables at the bottom. And this is a school achievement summary, page 4, which is just a single page view of the achievement that we viewed on the other pages. This is School Growth at a Glance report. It's a single page report, and it's a summary of school-wide growth. At the top, you'll see achievement level movement for each subject. In the middle, we have the mean growth value by teacher for each subject. And out to the sides, we have teacher rankings for each subject according to their mean growth value. Last, we have mean RIT growth trends for the past 3 years, and these are done by grade level for each subject.